3 horas, você vai ver nesta edição. Vasco e Cruzeiro se enfrentam daqui a pouco na primeira partida dos jogos das semifinais da Copa João Avelange. Globo News, o seu canal de jornalismo 24 horas no ar. Uma artista de circo de 20 anos de idade foi morta durante uma apresentação na Índia. O acidente aconteceu neste circo ao leste de Calcutá. Testemunhas horrorizadas disseram que na apresentação os tigres tinham que saltar sobre a artista, que estava deitada no chão. Mas os animais se aproximaram e atacaram a vítima de 20 anos. Houve pânico e correria, mas ninguém da plateia saiu ferido. A polícia local registrou o caso como negligência e prendeu o dono e o administrador do circo. O Reino Unido ainda corre o risco de enchentes por causa do transbordamento de rios. A área mais atingida é o oeste da Inglaterra. O nível dos rios continua subindo por causa da chuva que castiga o Reino Unido. Em uma semana, 600 casas foram danificadas. O alagamento levou alguns britânicos a colocarem barcos na rua. A Agência de Meio Ambiente do Reino Unido não prevê chuva forte para hoje, mas alerta que ainda há risco de enchentes porque o solo está saturado. Hoje é o dia da verdade para Vasco e Cruzeiro. O primeiro jogo pelas semifinais da Copa João Avelange era para ter acontecido na quinta-feira, mas uma liminar que o Sindicato dos Jogadores do Rio de Janeiro conseguiu na Justiça do Trabalho adiou a partida e acabou atrapalhando até as férias dos jogadores.
O cuidado com a grama, os preparativos no campo de jogo, seria o dia seguinte e virou véspera. Do ponto de vista do Vasco, quanto ao Cruzeiro...
Caminhei na Cantam ponta. Junto com os maiores bambas da velha guarda da Portela. Nomes como Monarco, Davi do Pandeiro, Jair do Cavaquinho, Argimiro, Casquinha, Casimiro da Cuíca, Cabelinho, Guaraci, Serginho Procópio e as pastoras Tia Eunice, Áurea Maria, Doca e Ciruca. São 9h05 da noite, horário de Brasília. Esse show é ao vivo na Praia de Ipanema. Quem também passou por lá foi a cantora cabo-verdiana Cesária Évora, chamada pela crítica internacional de a diva de pé no chão. Ela sempre se apresenta descalça. Cesária esperou quase 50 anos para se tornar famosa e aos 58 anos é a rainha da world music, com sua mistura de samba, fado e mambo. Agora um pouquinho mais com Paulinho da Viola e Marisa Monte. Você assiste a seguir ao programa Milênio. Eu volto no Jornal das 10. Até lá.
Você viu meu banco?
Seu banco? Onde estava?
No bolso da minha calça.
Aquela riscadinha?
Essa mesmo, você viu?
Xiii!
O que foi, Jô?
Acho que eu molhei ele.
Deixa, querido, usa o meu banco.
O HSBC está onde você precisa. Ser cliente HSBC é ter sempre uma agência com você.
Também, esse HSBC tem tudo que é canto.
Nosso Espaço Aberto tem a honra de receber um dos maiores nomes da música popular brasileira. Muita gente diz que Caymmi é preguiçoso. Você vai ver que ele é contemplativo. Há uma diferença.
Eu sou daqueles que contemplam ainda o homem que foi à lua, né? Essas coisas assim.
Ah, sim, senhor.
Espaço Aberto, com Chico Pinheiro. Hoje, 9h30 da noite, aqui na Globo News.
Inspections, intrusions, spies. Not able to do.
You are not able. This is your acceptation.
Sorry, I can't accept that.
Estas imagens de 1998 marcaram o final melancólico da missão da ONU que inspecionava a destruição do arsenal bélico de Saddam Hussein no Iraque. Richard Butler, o chefe da missão, é acusado pelo vice-primeiro-ministro Tariq Aziz de encobrir o serviço de espionagem que os inspetores faziam para os Estados Unidos. A imprensa americana botou lenha na fogueira, divulgando o nome e as atividades de alguns espiões, entre eles o inspetor-chefe Scott Ritter. Os inspetores foram obrigados a deixar o país e a crise acabou desembocando em mais um bombardeio contra o Iraque, a Operação Raposa do Deserto. Ritter agora surpreende o mundo ao voltar do Iraque com revelações que desfazem a imagem negativa de um país tratado como o vilão da história pelo mundo ocidental.
You just returned from Iraq, where you were as a official guest of President Saddam Hussein, and you were doing a documentary. How did you find Saddam if you had a chance to see him, and how did you find Iraq?
Well, a couple things. One, I wasn't an official guest of Saddam Hussein. Myself and the team of journalists were allowed into Iraq to do this documentary, and we were told that the permission came from the highest levels. Obviously, given the demonization that had occurred since my resignation about my personal character and such in Iraq, it was an extraordinary measure or effort for the Iraqis to allow me to come back to Iraq. We had requested an interview with the president of Iraq. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get this. We were able to interview some other senior Iraqis, officials such as Tariq Aziz, and Amr Rashid, the oil minister, and the presidential scientific advisor, Amr al-Sadi. The Iraqis were very cooperative in terms of trying to assist with the making of this documentary. I think they understand that given my history with them, that I'm a man of integrity, a man of honor, and an objective person, so that they trusted me to go in and make this film. They didn't undertake to put any controlling measures on me to dictate how I made this film, how I asked questions. It was a good experience.
How was your interview with Tariq Aziz, the man who called you a spy?
It was an interesting interview. Look, the bottom line comes down to the posturing that Tariq Aziz and other Iraqi officials took in regards to myself was primarily political. My record shows that that while I carried out some very sensitive tasks for the United Nations Special Commission and on behalf of the United Nations, at no time did I spy against Iraq. I was doing the work that we were allowed to do or mandated to do by the Security Council. But this work was very politicized because of Iraq's refusal to cooperate and because of the activities of nations such as the United States, which sought to misuse the inspections for their own unilateral good. I was singled out by the Iraqis, but I think the fact that they allowed me to come back in and interview Tariq Aziz shows that they know the truth, that at no time did I bring dishonor upon myself or the Special Commission. At all times I was an honest, objective, independent implementer of Security Council mandate.
But after 7 years as the chief inspector of UNSCOM, you resigned. Why did you resign? What did you wanted to achieve with your resignation?
The resignation wasn't meant to be a political act. I wasn't trying to achieve anything through my resignation. The resignation was more or less the culmination of the reality that I couldn't do my job anymore. For over 7 years, I and others, hundreds of others, were carrying out a very difficult task inside Iraq to achieve important disarmament objectives. In order to succeed at this, we needed to protect our status as United Nations inspectors. That is, that we had to make sure that we were working and could be seen as working only on behalf of the United Nations, carrying out only the will of the Security Council. The Security Council resolution that we were enforcing, or resolutions that we were implementing, dealt with the disarmament of Iraq, that is, getting rid of Iraq's weapons of mass destruction. Unfortunately, one of the senior members of the United Nations Security Council, the United States of America, had its own policy objectives, and those were the removal of Saddam Hussein from power in Iraq. Nothing the Security Council ever passed in terms of a resolution even hints at this objective, but that was the primary goal of the United States. And since 1991, the United States had been using the weapons inspection process as a vehicle for, A, gathering intelligence information about Iraq that could be used against Iraq primarily in terms of military targeting, and B, using the inspection process and Iraq's refusal to cooperate with the inspection process as justification for the continuation of economic sanctions. These sanctions were seen by the United States as the best way of containing Saddam Hussein until which time they could come up with an adequate means of removing him from power. This was a constant struggle as a weapons inspector, especially as an American weapons inspector carrying out some of the most sensitive tasks. How do we do our job? How do we make sure that we get the assistance we need from the United States without allowing the United States to corrupt the process? And what I mean by that is using the process to target the president of Iraq as opposed to targeting the weapons. By 1998, I was unable to continue this job in what I felt to be an honest manner, and I was forced to resign. There was no, I didn't want to achieve anything through the resignation. I just was unable to do the job anymore.
In the years that you worked in Iraq, what did you achieve?
Well, from 1991 to 1993, we were able to achieve significant disarmament of Iraq. Unfortunately, the Security Council talks about 100% disarmament and will accept nothing less. We were never able to verify 100% disarmament. We could verify 90%, 92%, 95%, but we could never achieve that 100% disarmament, and that's what caused us to stumble after 1995, because searching for that final few percentages led to a political confrontation between Iraq and the Security Council, and the inspectors, unfortunately, were stuck in the middle.
When you say we destroyed physically, would you describe that?
Well, in the case of ballistic missiles, the Iraqis would display the missiles. We would verify that these were the missiles, and then the Iraqis would actually do the destruction work. They would take bulldozers and crush the missiles. They would take the warheads into pits and blow them up with high explosive. They would pour the fuel and the oxidizer out into a field, dismantling or causing its destruction. On chemical weapons, we took the actual agent and incinerated it in a large incinerator. We blew it up. We lined them out in pits and exploded them with high explosives. Biological agent was neutralized. The growth media was poured into the earth and mixed up with the earth, so it wasn't useful. The factories themselves were blown up.
Some experts say that Saddam Hussein took advantage of this almost 2 years to replenish, to rebuild these facilities and go on with his program of mass destruction, weapons for mass destruction. What do you believe?
Well, this is pretty much a ludicrous assertion. On the one hand, I'm tired of experts making these statements and not backing it up with anything of substance. What is the evidence that they have about that this is happening? You know, let's put some facts out on the table. I'll put facts out on the table. It took Iraq 2 decades and tens of billions of dollars of money and access to the highest technology the world had to produce these weapons to begin with. So by 1991, Iraq had an industrial infrastructure that was very sophisticated at a very high level, so they could actually produce these weapons. By 1995, this infrastructure had been brought down to zero. Iraq no longer had the technology, no longer had the infrastructure, and no longer had the money to do this. So in the intervening 2 years since inspectors have been there, they haven't had the money, they haven't had the technology, and they haven't had the time. It's ludicrous to talk about Iraq producing ballistic missiles today. The same thing applies in biological, chemical, and especially nuclear. Richard Butler, my former boss, unfortunately, has been running around talking about Iraq has reassembled its nuclear weapons design team. What a ludicrous statement. I'd like him to identify what a nuclear design team is. Who are the personalities on this team? How does he get this information? Where are they in Iraq and what are they doing? Frankly speaking, he's working on rumor. He's working on some secondhand intelligence information which would have been dismissed had we been inspectors doing our job, because we don't act on rumor, we act on fact. The reality is the International Atomic Energy Agency and UNSCOM knows who the Iraqi nuclear design team is, knows who the people are on there. They interviewed these people, I've interviewed these people, we know where they're working, we know what kind of tasks they're doing, and it's irresponsible for Richard Butler or anybody else to talk about reassembling or recalling the nuclear design team.
So if that is so, why does not Saddam Hussein permit the presence of inspectors, and why is he threatening again to invade Kuwait?
Well, that's two totally separate issues. On the issue of the weapons inspections, remember that Iraq had allowed monitoring inspections. From 1993 to 1998, UNSCOM was in Iraq carrying out intrusive monitoring of Iraq's industrial infrastructure. Iraq never significantly impeded the work of these inspectors. So in terms of inspectors going in and doing real monitoring work, making sure Iraq cannot reconstitute its weapons of mass destruction program, Iraq has always allowed that kind of inspection. And Iraq today will allow that kind of inspection. The Iraqis are not saying they won't allow any inspectors in. But what they're saying is, look, we don't want Scott Ritter and others like him to come back into Iraq and carry out inspections of our most sensitive sites, sites that they feel have nothing to do with disarmament. Why should we allow United Nations weapons inspectors into our intelligence headquarters? Why should we allow them into our security installations? Why should we allow them into our military installations? We're talking about conventional military, armored divisions, the kind of military formations that protect the presidency, protect the government of Iraq. Why should we allow them into our presidential palaces, into the residences of the president? Especially when these inspectors have proven themselves to be able to be misused by other nations. If you take a look at Operation Desert Fox, the entire target list, with a few minor exceptions, that the United States used to bomb Iraq during that period of time was based upon information gathered by weapons inspectors. So the Iraqis will never allow weapons inspectors back into Iraq to carry out what they term to be espionage acts, what they term to be acts which threaten and have been proven to threaten the national security of Iraq. Iraq won't allow that. So when we talk about weapons inspections, we should talk about real inspections and political inspections. Real weapons inspections, inspections that deal with the reality of disarmament, Iraq will permit. Political inspections, inspections that have very little to do with disarmament and have a whole lot more to do with destabilizing the regime of Saddam Hussein, they will not permit. The other thing is, what's the end? Okay, you allow weapons inspectors back in, but the United States has said, and it has a stated policy, that sanctions will not be lifted until which time Saddam Hussein is removed from power, regardless of Iraq's disarmament obligation. Even if Iraq fully cooperates, we won't lift sanctions. So the Iraqis are saying, well, we're tired of this game. Why should we allow weapons inspectors back in unless there's a promise that economic sanctions will be lifted? The new resolution that everybody touts, the United States especially, 1284, does not lift economic sanctions. It suspends economic sanctions. But it allows the United States, through its position in the Security Council, to control Iraq's economy in a manner which is unacceptable to the Iraqis. It also does not identify what Iraq's actual disarmament obligation is. It's very fuzzy. So even if Iraq complies or thinks it's complied, the United States can redefine and hold Iraq to a new level of verification that Iraq may not be able to meet. So it's unacceptable to the Iraqis. They will allow weapons inspectors back in. I've been told this by Tariq Aziz and others, if economic sanctions will be lifted and if the inspections are truly disarmament related. That is monitoring type inspections. But they will not allow the inspection of presidential palaces. Now, why is Iraq acting the way they are towards Kuwait? The internal situation in Iraq today is very complicated. Very complicated. For 10 years now, Saddam Hussein has imperfectly attempted to cooperate with the United Nations and the weapons inspectors. Now, in exchange for this cooperation, it's an extremely high level of cooperation that took place. Iraq got nothing in return. Nothing. No easing of sanctions, nothing. There are many people in Iraq that blame Saddam Hussein for this, politically. In the past decade, there's an entire generation of Ba'ath Party politically active people who've come to political maturity under sanctions.
But are they a strong opposition?
Well, they're not in opposition. But they're strong. The reality of Iraq's politics is that the Ba'ath Party does wield considerable influence, and Saddam Hussein has to take into consideration the reality of internal politics. It's a balancing act, and right now you have a large number of people in the Ba'ath Party who are fed up with the current situation, and they say this is ridiculous. You've given everything to the United Nations, and we've got nothing in return. Maybe it's time that we just say the heck with it. Sanctions will collapse on their own, and then we will rebuild Iraq. You know, this could lead to the political rehabilitation of Saddam Hussein in Iraq within the Arab world. This is disastrous. It's disastrous for Israel. It's disastrous for the Arab world. It's disastrous for the United Nations. It's disastrous for Iraq.
What about the United States?
Well, of course. Look, the United States is to blame for all of this. I mean, this is a situation that was readily manageable. We have no strategic vision. We have no leadership in regards to how we want to deal with Iraq. And for 10 years, we've basically screwed this whole thing up. The moral position of the United States, its moral authority to lead, has been eroded. There's not too many people that will support a policy that results in the deaths of 1.5 million people. Now, there's many in the United States that blame Saddam Hussein for the deaths of these Iraqis. 1.5 million Iraqis have died either directly or indirectly as a result of this decade-long economic sanctions. The United States blames Saddam Hussein, but many people around the world blame the United States. They feel that the United States is responsible for the continuation of these economic sanctions, that Iraq has done enough in terms of disarmament to justify the lifting of sanctions, but that the sanctions won't be lifted because the United States doesn't want to deal with Saddam Hussein, because the United States has personalized this conflict. The United States will pay for this, because right now it's very difficult for the United States to exert the kind of moral pressure that it could on Egypt, on Jordan, on Saudi Arabia, on Kuwait, about Israel, when it has a very hypocritical position in regards to Iraq. The United States will pay a heavy price for this.
What would you suggest?
Look, it's a horribly complicated problem. There's no easy solution. But what I would suggest, first of all, is lifting the economic sanctions in return for in exchange for the return of monitoring weapons inspectors. Get the weapons inspectors back into Iraq so that they monitor Iraq's industrial infrastructure to ensure that Iraq cannot reconstitute weapons of mass destruction capability. It won't be perfect, but it will be the best system that's there. In exchange for that, once you lift economic sanctions, Saddam Hussein is going to be under tremendous pressure to rebuild Iraq's economy. So the next thing that has to happen is a plan for the economic revitalization of Iraq. How do we rebuild Iraq? How do we get Iraq from this horrible situation there are today back on its feet? There needs to be a plan for dealing with Iraq's tremendous foreign debt. There needs to be a plan for providing loans to Iraq or grants to Iraq to allow it to rebuild. There has to be this kind of long-term vision on how to bring Iraq back into the fold. You're going to have a plan on disarmament in the region. Here we tell Iraq they have to be disarmed to a 0 level.
What about Israel?
And yet, what about Iran? What about Israel? What about other nations, Syria, that possess weapons of mass destruction capability? What is the plan on dealing with those nations? There has to be some sort of plan. But it's not just unconventional weapons. What happens when the United States sells advanced F-16 fighters to the United Arab Emirates? Iraq has no fighter aircraft capable of dealing with that airplane. The Russians don't have anything they can sell to the Iraqis capable of dealing with that aircraft. We're not going to sell Iraq advanced F-16s. So now Iraq immediately feels inferior. What will be their response? Probably to build long-range ballistic missiles that can strike the United Arab Emirates. It's destabilizing. What happens when we sell ATACMS short-range missiles to Bahrain, which we've just done? We've sold 30 to 50 of these systems to Bahrain. It's an advanced system. It gives Bahrain, a small country, a decided advantage on the battlefield. Iraq has nothing to counter that. How will Iraq counter that? They'll have to buy or make a missile system of equal or superior capability. It's destabilizing. It's this arms race. So do we want Iraq, once sanctions are lifted, to be pouring its money into economic revitalization, or do we want Iraq pouring its money into military rebuilding? If we continue the kind of arms sale policy that we have in the region today, we're guaranteeing that Iraq will rebuild its military. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we want Iraq to focus on the economy, to focus on bettering the life of the Iraqi citizen, then we need to be responsible in how we sell arms to the region. There has to be a vision. There is no vision right now.
Would you please tell us about this documentary that you shot in Iraq, and also the importance of this Iraq businessman in this documentary?
I speak to audiences, but it's a very narrow audience of people who are already informed on the subject. How do you influence a wider population? How do you get the facts out to them so they can make an informed decision on this very difficult problem? And I figured the best way to do that would be through a documentary film. This Iraqi-American businessman, remember, he's an American citizen. The key thing about saying he's an American citizen is to recall that he is subjected to the same laws that I am. There are stringent economic sanctions in place against Iraq, which govern anything that could be construed as economic activity. There is no way legally this man could fund this film and use this as a vehicle to carry out pro-Iraqi government activities. That would be illegal under the law. The fact that the United States government has not stopped the production of this film is proof positive that I am doing a correct activity, that this is a correct activity. We're not breaking any law. This is an independent, objective, analytical look at the situation today in Iraq as regards weapons of mass destruction, plain and simple. This gentleman was courageous enough to fund this activity. He put up his own money to this. It's a loan. $400,000, it's a loan. My production company is borrowing this money. I have to pay it back. It's not a gift. He's not giving it to me gratis. I have to pay it back. He has no control over how I spend this money. He has no control over the film. I interview people. I edit the film. I have total control. This man has nothing to say on this. So I could produce a film that says, down with Saddam. Saddam is a pig. Continue economic sanctions. You know, he can't stop me. It's my film. I will produce this film based upon my experience, based upon my views on what's right, but more importantly, based upon what people are telling me. This isn't the Scott Ritter story. Tariq Aziz tells me, I interview him, I use his words. I use the words of Patrick Clausen, an anti-Iraqi academic economist in Washington, D.C., Daniel Pipes, a renowned scholar and national security specialist, anti-Iraqi. Everybody gets equal time in this film to tell their story. So I don't get hung up on the money. I'm grateful that Shakir al-Khafaji, the Iraqi-American businessman from Detroit, was able to loan me $400,000 for the production of this film, and I am certainly hopeful that I will be able to not only get this film out there, but get it out there in a way that allows me to earn money and repay this debt that I have. But his money and his status as an Iraqi-American has no bearing whatsoever on the content of this film. None.
Thank you.
Thank you.
O meu amigo oculto é uma pessoa séria.
O meu amigo oculto adora pagode.
Presente Maxitel. Todo mundo vai fazer de tudo para ganhar. Nokia 5120i, 198 à vista. Kit Max com Nokia 5120i, 267 à vista.
Olha quem está em quem desta semana. Gisele Bündchen mostra seu bustier de 15 milhões de dólares. Diz que não pode se casar até 2005 e conta seus planos para as festas. Tiago Lacerda está disponível e fala de sua vida agora morando sozinho. Fotos exclusivas de Maradona em festa íntima na noite de Buenos Aires. Grátis nesta edição, um cupom para concorrer ao sorteio de um Peugeot e um helicóptero. Revista Quem mostra tudo como ninguém, já nas bancas.
Eu quero usar melhor o meu dinheiro.
Escolher como pagar minhas contas. Já existe um jeito moderno de financiar suas contas. American Express Credit é azul, é diferente, com uma das taxas mais baixas do mercado.
Quero economizar mais e realizar mais.
E só com ele, você pode transferir saldo de outros cartões para American Express, com juros mais baixos. Quero tomar melhores decisões. Cartão azul da American Express. Primeira unidade grátis. Peça hoje.
A emoção do Natal voa com as asas da Varig.
Espaço Aberto Chico Pinheiro. Apoio LG, o futuro como você nunca imaginou. LG, a cara do futuro.
Mais de 70 mil pensamentos todos os dias. Olhos que reconhecem 10 milhões de cores diferentes. Audição que detecta frequências entre 20 e 20 mil Hz. 656 músculos. 17 que se mexem quando ele sorri. O ser humano, nós sabemos para quem produzimos a tecnologia digital. LG, a cara do